The American space program is undergoing one of the most dramatic shakeups in its history. The White House's fiscal year 2026 budget request, despite being newly unveiled, has sent shockwaves through the aerospace world, leaving the old space giants trembling. If a political powerhouse like the Space Launch System, a massive jobs machine with deep-rooted influence, is now staring down possible extinction, then what hope is there for a much smaller, chronically troubled project like Boeing's Starliner? We're diving deep into the shifting landscape of American spaceflight in today's explosive episode of Techmap. Don't miss it. The downfall of Boeing's space ambitions might be closer than anyone expected. Once a trailblazer in human space exploration, Boeing now finds itself at the center of mounting criticism and failure. Programs like the Space Launch System, SLS, and Starliner have become synonymous with missed deadlines and massive financial overruns. Let's dig into the numbers. The SLS program, launched in 2011, had racked up an eye-watering $23.8 billion bill by the time its first Artemis test flight took off in 2022, far beyond the original $18 billion estimate. And that first launch? It was supposed to happen in 2016. It slipped nearly 6 years. Now, who's to blame for all this? Well, it's not quite that simple. The SLS is a political beast, a massive employment engine with many hands in the pot. But Boeing, as the main contractor, can't dodge accountability. The company was tasked with building the core stage and the exploration upper stage, EUS, both critical to the rocket's performance. But here's the kicker. The EUS's cost exploded from $962 million in 2017 to over $2 billion by 2025, and it's forecasted to hit $2.8 billion by 2028. And what are taxpayers getting for their money? Almost nothing. Boeing's quality control at its Michoud assembly facility has fallen short of both NASA's expectations and industry norms. Inexperienced workers, poor planning, and lax supervision have made the situation even worse, putting NASA's safety requirements at risk. All this inefficiency has translated into ballooning costs and fat profits for Boeing's top brass. But it doesn't stop with SLS. Once you've tapped into the well of government contracts, it's hard to stop drinking. That's where the Starliner comes in. Another program, another opportunity to burn through taxpayer dollars, all while Boeing keeps asking for more. Thanks to its reputation and strong lobbying game, Boeing secured the lion's share of NASA's contract in Commercial Crew Program with ease, raking in a whopping $4.2 billion compared to SpaceX's $2.6 billion. Their original plan? Take the whole pie. And they almost did. Later, Boeing got an extra $400 million, bumping the total contract value up to $4.6 billion. You might already be guessing where all that money went. More than 10 years have passed, and Starliner still isn't certified for human spaceflight. The spacecraft has only completed 3 test flights, and the last test, namely the first crewed test flight. A total disaster. It ended with 2 NASA astronauts stranded in space for 9 months. Ultimately, it was SpaceX's Crew Dragon, not Boeing's Starliner, that brought them safely home. Yep, the only US-made spacecraft actually certified to carry astronauts to and from the ISS came to the rescue. You'd think this would be a turning point, but neither NASA nor Boeing has publicly admitted what seems painfully obvious. The Starliner has been a wreck from the start. With losses surpassing $2 billion to date, common sense would suggest pulling the plug. But instead, NASA and Boeing continue to push forward, aiming to certify Starliner for a potential mission in late 2025 or early 2026. Why? NASA doesn't want to be too dependent on SpaceX. Boeing is eyeing some extra cash by successfully performing some operational missions. Literally. Despite all the hype, the company hasn't pocketed the full $4.6 billion from NASA yet. That's because this isn't a blank check. NASA's contract is fixed price and milestone based. Boeing only gets paid when it actually delivers. To unlock the rest of the funds, the company must complete a checklist: successful test flights, final certifications, and 6 operational missions. Even after all these years, Starliner still hasn't been certified. But once that milestone is hit, as I know, Boeing is obligated to fly at least 2 missions, and could fly as many as 6 under the original deal. And let's be honest, Boeing might be totally fine with just squeaking out 2 post-certification flights, cashing in, and calling it a day. But let's be real. This entire plan looks increasingly detached from reality, especially considering the massive shift in momentum toward SpaceX and Musk's Mars ambitions. Here's where things get even messier. The White House's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget includes a brutal 24% cut to NASA, slashing over $500 million from the ISS program alone. The rationale? It's time to transition to private space stations, where NASA is just a customer, not the operator. The budget reduces the space station's crew size and onboard research, preparing for a safe decommissioning of the station by 2030 and replacement by commercial space stations, the White House stated. Crew and cargo flights to the station would be significantly reduced. The station's reduced research capacity would be focused on efforts critical to the Moon and Mars exploration programs. Here's what this means in practice. NASA plans to stretch crew missions from 6 to 8 months. That means fewer flights, just 3 crewed missions every 2 years instead of 4, resulting in big savings. Now, with only 5 years left until ISS retirement in 2030, the real question is, how will NASA split those missions between Boeing's Starliner and SpaceX's Crew Dragon? Let's do some quick math. At 3 missions every 2 years, NASA needs about 7.5 missions in the next 5 years to keep the ISS staffed. If they alternate, each company might fly just 3 missions. That lines up with the Authority to Proceed, ATP. NASA has already given Boeing for 3 of the 6 planned Starliner flights. A TP is basically NASA saying, "We're ordering this now, but we'll launch later." Usually, these orders are made 2 to 3 years ahead of the mission. But here's the catch. None of this can happen until Starliner is fully certified. And with all its ongoing issues and growing uncertainty, that's far from guaranteed. When asked about how budget cuts might affect Starliner, NASA Press Secretary Bethany Stevens didn't exactly offer clarity. NASA's focus would be on safely decommissioning the International Space Station in 2030 and transitioning to commercial replacements, focusing onboard research on efforts critical to the exploration of the Moon and Mars. Beyond that, we have no additional information to offer at this time, she said. And that was it. No further comment. The Starliner program is not just on life support. It's hearing the flatline tone. And here's why I'm saying that with confidence. If NASA is willing to sunset the massive, politically backed SLS, then what chance does a smaller, repeatedly delayed project like Starliner have? Let's look at the numbers and the narrative. In the Trump administration's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget, one of the boldest moves is to begin phasing out both the SLS rocket and Orion spacecraft, the very core of the Artemis lunar program, after just 3 launches. Instead, the budget shifts focus toward leveraging cheaper, more flexible commercial systems for future moon missions. This isn't just belt tightening, it's a strategic pivot. Out of the lean $18.8 billion proposed for NASA, over $7 billion is allocated to lunar exploration, with a fresh $1 billion earmarked for Mars initiatives. The budget frames this as a push to make America's space exploration efforts more unparalleled, innovative, and efficient. Now, Jared Isaacman, the billionaire pilot behind the Polaris missions and nominee to be NASA's next administrator, backs the Artemis architecture for now. During his April 9th confirmation hearing, he called it the fastest path back to the Moon. But he also made it clear the future lies with commercial heavy-lift rockets. Responding to a question from Senator Ted Cruz, he said, NASA should take advantage of that competition and eventually refocus its world-class talent and infrastructure on what no one else is doing, developing the next generation of exploration technologies. And the shakeup doesn't stop there. The budget proposal would also cancel the Lunar Gateway, an international outpost planned to orbit the Moon. While the document gives no detailed reasoning, this move threatens partnerships with key allies like Europe, Japan, Canada, and the UAE, countries that were contributing key hardware to Gateway in exchange for future astronaut seats on lunar missions. When asked about it, Isaac Mann told Cruz he wasn't aware of any firm plans to cancel Gateway, but he added, "If such a situation arose, I would work closely with our partners, as I have done in countless complex international negotiations in my business career, to find an acceptable path forward." Bottom line: if flagship programs like SLS and Gateway are getting benched, there's little hope left for Starliner. Its repeated setbacks, high costs, and limited usefulness make it the most obvious candidate for a quiet cancellation. In the new NASA roadmap, there's just no room left for underperforming projects. The bill would cut the budget for the International Space Station, about $3 billion for operations and transportation in 2025, by $500 million. The budget reduces the space station's crew size and onboard research, preparing for a safe decommissioning of the station by 2030 and replacement by commercial space stations, it states, but does not include specifics on the cuts in crew size or research activities. Crew and cargo launches to the ISS would also be reduced. The station's reduced research capacity would be focused on efforts critical to the Moon and Mars exploration programs. Isaac Mann told Democratic senators in written responses to questions that NASA should ignite a thriving space economy by maximizing the remaining life and utility of the International Space Station. That included a need to prioritize the highest potential science and research on the ISS that could help crack the code on a sustainable orbital economy. The skinny budget confirms deep cuts in NASA science programs that leaked out in an Office of Management and Budget passback document to NASA 3 weeks ago. The only mission specifically mentioned in the bill for cancellation is Mars sample return, although it notes that the gold-plated Landsat Next program would also be restructured. Isaac Mann, in a response to written questions from Senator Maria Cantwell, ranking member of the Senate Commerce Committee, said he was unaware of the proposed science cuts, but added that a roughly 50% reduction to NASA's science budget does not appear to be an optimal outcome. On May 2nd, the White House dropped a bombshell with the release of its proposed budget for fiscal year 2026, and the reactions were immediate and intense. The spotlight quickly turned to NASA, as the plan calls for a jaw-dropping 24% budget cut, slashing funding from $24.8 billion in 2025 to just $18.8 billion in 2026. That's not just a big number. It's the largest single-year funding cut in NASA's history. Adjusted for inflation, this puts NASA's financial resources on par with what the agency had in the early 1980s. To give you some context, NASA's 1980 budget was around $4.959 billion, which translates to about $18.338 billion in today's dollars. The new proposal's $18.8 billion figure essentially takes NASA back in time, funding-wise, by 4 decades. This dramatic funding rollback couldn't come at a more challenging time. NASA is juggling incredibly ambitious goals, like returning humans to the Moon through the Artemis program and laying the groundwork for future Mars missions. Meanwhile, back in the 1980s, NASA's primary focus was the Space Shuttle program, a comparatively less complex endeavor than today's multifaceted deep space operations. The proposed budget does offer a slight silver lining: a 10% increase in funding for human space exploration. That means $7 billion earmarked for moon missions and an additional $1 billion for Mars. But that modest boost comes at a steep cost elsewhere. Space science and Earth science programs are on the chopping block, facing cuts of $2.3 billion and $1.2 billion, respectively. NASA's Science Mission Directorate would see its budget nearly halved, from $7.3 billion in 2025 to $3.9 billion in 2026. The biggest casualty? Astrophysics, which would plummet from $1.5 billion to a mere $487 million. That includes the proposed cancellation of the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, a major mission that was on track and within budget for a 2026 launch. Earth science would be sliced by over 50% to just above $1 billion, while heliophysics funding would shrink by nearly half to about $450 million. Another devastating blow is the proposed cancellation of the Mars Sample Return mission. Despite the Perseverance rover already collecting 27 tubes of Martian samples, this mission, which holds the promise of uncovering signs of life on Mars, would be axed. Perhaps most alarming is what these changes mean for Artemis. First up is the scrapping of the Lunar Gateway, a planned lunar orbiting space station. This is despite $3.5 billion already spent and partially completed modules. The Gateway was intended as a critical support hub for astronauts heading to and from the Moon. Even NASA's flagship vehicles, the Space Launch System and the Orion capsule, projects that have been in development since 2006 and cost tens of billions, would be shelved after just 2 more missions. That puts the future of crewed lunar exploration in jeopardy. The International Space Station wouldn't be spared either. Research and crew activities would be scaled back, and plans are in motion to decommission the ISS by 2030, with a transition to private sector operations in low Earth orbit. And it doesn't stop there. The proposed budget could also shutter NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, home to roughly 10,000 employees. Climate research and green aviation projects are also at risk, as part of the administration's broader stance against what it labels climate scam initiatives. It can be said that this shakeup has been long awaited, especially given the growing frustration with NASA's perceived stagnation and inefficiency, particularly when you stack it up against the rapid, cost-effective strides made by private companies like SpaceX. Much of NASA's infrastructure is stuck in the past. A staggering 83% of its facilities have outlived their intended lifespan, with many dating back to the 1960s. Take the SLS as a prime example. It carries the legacy of the Saturn and Space Shuttle programs, boasting powerful flight-proven technology. But despite its might, SLS is seen as outdated when compared to today's innovative commercial rockets. It's not reusable, which drives the cost of a single launch beyond $4 billion. Development has also been a rocky road. Just look at how the Constellation program was scrapped due to budget issues, only to be revived under a new name, Artemis SLS, with even more constraints. Now contrast that with SpaceX. Their approach is radically different. They treat rockets and spacecraft like evolving platforms, built for rapid upgrades and reuse. From the reusable Falcon boosters to the experimental Starship, SpaceX is all about scalability and cost efficiency. And let's not forget their bold engineering feats, like the gigantic Mechazilla structure designed to catch Starship mid-air, something straight out of science fiction. Beyond outdated infrastructure, NASA struggles with systemic inefficiencies and a disconnect between its budget allocations and actual program goals. This often results in short-term, reactionary decisions rather than long-term strategy. The agency still relies on the traditional waterfall project management model, a rigid, step-by-step approach that demands extensive reviews and re-verification at every turn. While this reduces risk, it slows development and inflates costs. SLS, for example, has been in the works for over a decade and plagued with delays due to this overly cautious process. Meanwhile, SpaceX runs on agile methodology, focused on rapid prototyping, iterative testing, and learning from failure. Elon Musk isn't afraid of rocket crashes. He sees them as opportunities to improve. It's a sharp contrast to NASA's approach, where avoiding failure is paramount because of the political and financial stakes tied to taxpayer funding. An Oxford case study backs this up. NASA projects on average run 90% over budget and take about 7 years to complete. SpaceX, just a 1.1% cost overrun and a 4-year average timeline, faster, cheaper, and just as capable. A big part of NASA's delay and cost issues comes from its tangled web of contractors and subcontractors. The complex supply chains make decisions slow and adaptation difficult. Any change requires coordination across multiple organizations. SpaceX avoids that problem with a vertically integrated model, designing, building, and testing everything in-house, which allows them to move fast and pivot when needed. Even without the fiscal year 2026 budget proposal, it's only a matter of time before NASA's SLS gets phased out in favor of commercial rockets that are cheaper, more advanced, and more readily available. However, there was a time that NASA planned to commercialize this Frankenstein's monster. In 2023, NASA signaled its intention to transition the SLS to a commercial services contract. This move is designed to tackle rising costs and complexity, especially as the agency gears up for the more ambitious Artemis 4 and future missions. The plan is to cut the cost of building an SLS rocket in half, from $2.5 billion to $1.25 billion, while streamlining operations and contracts. Essentially, NASA wants to treat SLS like it does with commercial rocket launches. Buy the service, not the rocket. To make this happen, NASA is introducing a new contract model called the Exploration Production and Operations Contract, EPOC. Under EPOC, the production, integration, and launch of SLS will be handled by a single joint venture, Deep Space Transport, LLC, DST, formed by Boeing and Northrop Grumman. By moving to a commercial service model, NASA hopes to reduce long-term costs and improve operational efficiency. But it's not going to be easy. There are plenty of hurdles. High initial costs, complex manufacturing processes that require specialized labor, limited competition due to sole source contracts, and challenges in negotiating fixed-price deals that actually motivate cost control. Plus, intellectual property restrictions make it hard for NASA to bring in new players. And let's not forget the lessons learned from the space shuttle era. Cutting too much government oversight can backfire. NASA plans to conduct a 3-year pre-EPOC evaluation, starting in 2024, to assess whether DST is up to the task. Until then, SLS will remain critical for the near-term Artemis missions. However, commercial heavy-lift rockets, like SpaceX's Starship or Blue Origin's upcoming offerings, may become viable, lower-cost alternatives in the not-so-distant future. NASA's walking a fine line between slashing costs and ensuring mission safety, while staying flexible enough to incorporate emerging technologies. So, what happens after 2026? That's still up in the air. Will SLS be shelved entirely or continue under a new commercial model? Honestly, even at a reduced price, it's tough to see SLS finding buyers in today's market. Think about it. $1 billion expendable rocket, or SpaceX's Falcon Heavy at just $150 million per launch, or even under a $10 million cost per launch on Starship? Which would you choose? Let me know your take in the comments below. That said, commercializing SLS isn't some wild sci-fi dream. It's still an incredibly powerful vehicle that carries the heritage of both the Saturn V and Space Shuttle programs. Right now, it's the only heavy-lift launch system certified to carry astronauts on deep space missions like going back to the moon. Its numbers speak volumes. It can haul up to 130 tons, more than double Falcon Heavy's 63.8 tons. Its 2 solid rocket boosters provide over 75% of the thrust at launch, guzzling 5 tons of fuel every 6 seconds. Each one generates as much thrust as 14 Boeing 747s. Design-wise, SLS is built on legacy hardware. The boosters are upgrades of the same ones used in the space shuttle, with a fifth segment added to boost fuel capacity by 25%. However, unlike the shuttle's boosters, these aren't reusable. And the core's RS-25 engines? They're not just replicas. They're actual engines recovered from past shuttle flights. For example, the 4 engines used on Artemis 1 have known flight histories, having powered missions to the ISS and the Hubble Space Telescope. Inefficient? Maybe, but undeniably awesome. SLS is often described as a blend of Saturn V's brute strength and the shuttle's engineering legacy, an icon of old-school rocket power infused with modern upgrades, built to lead NASA into the next era of space exploration. More than a decade ago, in quiet rooms of NASA's headquarters, a strange idea was taking shape. What if we could grab an asteroid and park it near Earth? It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel. And during the Obama years, that wild idea began to take form. But as time passed, the asteroid dream faded. Too complicated, too costly. Still, NASA was left with the skeleton of a plan, a small station in deep space. Then came a change in leadership and a shift in vision. The Trump administration said, "Forget the asteroid. Let's take this outpost and move it around the moon." Just like that, the Lunar Gateway was born. It isn't designed to be a sprawling space city. It's actually just about 1/6 the mass of the International Space Station. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in purpose, offering a much more spacious and functional environment compared to the tight quarters of the Orion capsule or lunar landers. Its main role, acting as a crucial staging point for astronauts traveling from Earth to the Moon, especially to the lunar South Pole, a region of intense interest due to the presence of valuable water ice. The mission architecture is simple but groundbreaking. Astronauts will launch aboard the Orion spacecraft, dock at the gateway, and then board lunar landers stationed there to descend to the Moon's surface. Once the gateway is fully operational, it's expected to support missions lasting up to 90 days. That's 3 full months of cutting-edge scientific research in disciplines ranging from planetary science and astrophysics to Earth observation, heliophysics, space biology, and the study of human health in deep space. And while it's smaller than the ISS, the Lunar Gateway would help NASA gain experience sustaining human crews 1,000 times farther from Earth than the ISS. In short, the Lunar Gateway is set to become a versatile scientific outpost, logistics hub, and transport waypoint for NASA's Artemis missions. It all kicks off with Artemis 4, the first crewed mission scheduled to dock with the Gateway, targeted for no earlier than September 2028. But to make sustained operations in lunar orbit possible, regular resupply missions are a must. That's where SpaceX steps in with the Dragon XL, a supersized version of their cargo spacecraft designed to keep the Gateway stocked and ready for deep space exploration. Under the Gateway Logistics Services contract, the spacecraft, which will ride atop the mighty Falcon Heavy, is expected to start delivering cargo to the Lunar Gateway as early as 2024. But it is now pushed back potentially to after 2025, but still before the first crewed Gateway mission in 2028 with Artemis 4. This gives NASA some breathing room to reevaluate just how the Gateway fits into the broader Artemis program. Now, here's the deal. There are at least 2 supply missions planned, and each one is going to last somewhere between 6 to 12 months. These missions are crucial because they'll support remote operations of payloads when no astronauts are on board. It's basically a lifeline to keep things running smoothly on the Gateway when it's empty. Think of Dragon XL as a bigger, more robust version of SpaceX's Dragon cargo missions that we see going to the International Space Station. But this one is tailored for the deep space environment of lunar orbit, which means it's undergone some pretty significant changes to handle the harsh conditions of the Moon and beyond. First up, payload capacity. Dragon XL can carry over 5,000 kilograms, or about 11,000 pounds, of combined pressurized and unpressurized cargo. That's a huge step up from the earlier Dragon versions. It's got design upgrades like more propellant storage and expanded cargo space, all optimized for gateway logistics and long-duration missions. Speaking of long duration, Dragon XL needs to be capable of staying docked for extended periods. To make that work, it's got advanced systems for things like power, thermal control, and remote operations. But here's the catch: it's not reusable. Once it finishes its mission, it'll undock and dispose of its waste by sending itself into a heliocentric orbit, keeping the lunar orbit clean and sustainable. Now I know what you're thinking. If Dragon XL isn't reusable, won't that jack up the cost? Well, fortunately, SpaceX has a way around that. By reusing flight-proven hardware from previous Dragon and Falcon vehicles, like Falcon rocket oxygen tanks, Dragon 1 solar panels and thrusters, they can keep costs down. This not only makes it cheaper, but it also reduces development risk since they're using proven technology. On top of that, they're modifying these systems to make sure the spacecraft can handle the unique needs of the Gateway's cislunar environment. From cargo configurations to docking interfaces, everything will be fine-tuned for the mission profile of lunar logistics. But here's something interesting. NASA has considered the possibility that astronauts might use Dragon XL for more than just cargo. They might use it as additional living space, or even as a bathroom facility, given that the Gateway itself has limited room for habitation. While Dragon XL is primarily a cargo vehicle, this could lead to design tweaks to make it a bit more human-friendly for future crewed missions. However, Dragon XL isn't going to be the long-term solution. It's serving as the initial commercial logistics provider for the Gateway, but as Starship evolves and matures, it could eventually replace or complement Dragon XL. That's influencing how SpaceX is designing Dragon XL, ensuring it meets the near-term needs while leaving the door open for future upgrades. To sum it up, Dragon XL is designed to scale up cargo capacity, support long-term docked operations with remote payloads, ensure sustainable waste management, and leverage SpaceX's proven hardware, all while adapting to the unique demands of the Lunar Gateway and the Artemis missions. While all of this sounds incredibly exciting, there's a bit of a sad twist to the story. The harsh truth is, we might never actually see Dragon XL in action, at least not as originally planned under the Artemis framework. With the growing number of delays, cost overruns, and shifting priorities, NASA's 2026 budget proposal includes some dramatic changes. It aims to phase out 3 major pillars of the Artemis program: the SLS rocket, the Orion crew capsule, and yes, the Lunar Gateway itself. If approved, all 3 could be shut down as early as 2026, after just 3 missions. And once the Gateway is off the table, everything built around it, including Dragon XL, suddenly loses its purpose. It makes sense from a business standpoint. Without a clear mission or destination, there's no financial reason for SpaceX to move forward with Dragon XL. Unlike Crew Dragon or Cargo Dragon, which regularly serve the ISS, Dragon XL doesn't have a backup market. There's no other place right now that needs a huge, long-duration cargo vehicle designed for lunar orbit. Technically, it's too large and over-engineered for low Earth orbit, so it's not suited for ISS resupply. And since it's not crew-rated, it can't replace Crew Dragon either. Additionally, NASA is pivoting toward a new strategy, using more cost-effective commercial systems like Starship or Blue Origin's New Glenn to deliver cargo, and even astronauts, directly to the lunar surface. These newer systems don't necessarily need a lunar space station like Gateway. They could skip the orbiting outpost altogether, opting for simpler, direct architectures. So far, there's no official word on any alternative station or orbital platform where Dragon XL could be repurposed. It was built for a very specific job: long dock times, power and thermal management for remote payloads, and sustainable waste disposal by self-ejecting into a heliocentric orbit. These features might not apply to future mission designs. And here's where things get even more interesting. NASA awarded SpaceX an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract for Dragon XL. That means it doesn't guarantee any specific number of flights. It's more of a placeholder agreement. So if NASA pulls the plug on Gateway, they can walk away from the contract without paying big penalties. As of 2025, no official Dragon XL missions have been ordered, so there's not much to cancel beyond some R&D support. For short, Dragon XL's future is hanging in the balance. To summarize everything, with NASA proposing to cancel the Lunar Gateway and phase out Artemis's SLS and Orion, Dragon XL is essentially left without a mission. Unless a new lunar orbital station is proposed, or unless SpaceX finds a way to repurpose the spacecraft, its role in lunar logistics may never materialize. NASA's focus is clearly shifting toward direct lunar surface missions and more affordable commercial vehicles. And Dragon XL, while impressive, might just become a relic of a strategy that never fully took off. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Will NASA and SpaceX scrap Dragon XL completely, or could it be reimagined for a future lunar mission? Could private space stations or even international partnerships give it a second life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss out on more deep dives into spaceflight, tech, and the future of exploration. Once Dragon XL, as well as the Dragon line, steps back, Starship will be the new future. The Starship launch system developed by SpaceX marks a groundbreaking advancement in space exploration and aerospace technology, capturing Elon Musk's bold vision of expanding humanity's reach beyond Earth. With its fully reusable design, Starship is poised to transform space travel as we know it, capable of transporting both people and cargo to destinations like the Moon, Mars, and potentially even farther. This innovative spacecraft challenges the norms of traditional rocket technology by aiming to dramatically cut the cost of space access, paving the way for the colonization of other planets and the growth of a sustainable space-based economy. At the heart of Musk's dream to make humanity a multi-planetary species is Starship, a powerful, adaptable launch system designed for a wide range of missions, from commercial satellite deployments to deep space exploration. Its ability to carry massive payloads and support human life, coupled with its unique vertical landing capability, unlocks new frontiers in scientific research, interplanetary logistics, and even space tourism. If Starship lives up to its potential, it will signal the dawn of a new chapter in space exploration, one where traveling between planets could become routine, affordable, and more frequent than ever before. This monumental leap forward won't just reshape how national space agencies like NASA and ESA operate, it will also redefine the future of private spaceflight and ignite the imagination of the next generation of explorers. Following an explosion during Ship 35's static fire test at Starbase, SpaceX has delayed the much-anticipated Starship Flight 9, originally slated for the third week of May. While the setback may be disappointing to some, the excitement surrounding this mission remains strong. Fans and space enthusiasts are eagerly looking forward to several key upgrades on Ship 35, another Block 2 hardware, and notably the reuse of Booster 14, a Super Heavy booster that previously flew on Flight 7. This marks the first time SpaceX will attempt to reuse a Super Heavy booster, signaling a major milestone. However, reusing the booster comes with increased risk, especially during its return when it's supposed to be caught by Mechazilla. This daring maneuver leaves no room for error. A misstep while catching the rocket could lead to catastrophic damage to both the booster and the launch tower, as well as surrounding infrastructure. Therefore, Flight 9 will not attempt a booster catch by the launch tower. Instead, the booster will perform a controlled ocean landing. Mechazilla's robotic arms must execute the catch with pinpoint precision. Perfect timing, velocity, positioning, and orientation are critical. Unlike traditional rocket landings, where there's some leeway for corrections. This method demands absolute accuracy. Even a fraction of a second delay or slight deviation can result in mission failure. That's why relying solely on a fixed catch tower isn't necessarily the most reliable strategy. SpaceX needs to remain adaptable, including exploring alternatives like equipping Starship with landing legs. This may sound like a contradiction, considering Elon Musk's long-standing mantra, "The best part is no part," pointing out that landing gear adds unnecessary weight. But when it comes to landing on celestial bodies like the Moon or Mars, where preparing something like Mechazilla in advance isn't feasible, landing legs become not just practical but essential. In fact, during his presentation at the 2023 International Astronautical Congress, Musk noted, "We can take a Starship that's fairly unmodified from what would land on Earth. Obviously, you would need landing legs on the Moon." Right now, the lunar lander version of Starship is the only one equipped with landing legs. These legs are quite different from what you'd see on a rocket meant to land on Earth. And that's because the Moon poses its own unique set of challenges. With gravity only about 1/6 of what we experience on Earth, the legs don't need to support as much weight. Plus, since there's no atmosphere, there's no need for aerodynamic braking or heat shields, which helps simplify the design and reduce overall mass. That said, the legs are still built tough. They can handle the powerful winds that whip past the rocket as it punches through the atmosphere during ascent. The Moon doesn't have flat, paved runways, so Starship's lunar version needs legs that can automatically adjust to whatever terrain it touches down on. To avoid kicking up too much lunar dust, something that can be a major issue, SpaceX has designed the Human Landing System Starship to use specialized thrusters mounted near the nose instead of relying on the Raptor engines for the final moments of descent. These landing legs are not only auto-leveling but also made from lightweight, high-strength materials like titanium composites. They even have foot extensions for better stability, allowing the lander to sit securely on the Moon's uneven surface. Now let's talk about Mars. Landing there is a whole different ballgame. Starship uses a maneuver called the belly flop to slow down when returning to Earth, shedding nearly 99.9% of its orbital speed before flipping into a vertical position at around 90 meters per second for landing. But Mars has a thinner atmosphere, so Starship can only lose about 99% of its speed, which leaves it coming in at about 450 meters per second, 5 times faster than on Earth. Fortunately, Starship has a delta-V capability of around 7,000 meters per second, and because it'll be much lighter after burning through most of its fuel, and Mars has only 38% of Earth's gravity, landing is still within reach. The Martian atmosphere, while thin, can still help bleed off some speed, and with enough thrust, a safe landing is achievable. On the other hand, landing on Mars is often likened to climbing Mount Everest. It's that risky. The atmospheric density on Mars changes based on things like the season, the weather, where you're landing, and even the time of day. Every year, nearly 8 million metric tons of carbon dioxide flow in and out of the atmosphere. Because of this, scientists are creating detailed models of the Martian atmosphere to help ensure spacecraft land when the air is thick enough and visibility is good. They're also thinking about whether it's better for incoming missions to land right away or wait in orbit until conditions improve, especially if a dust storm is rolling in. To land on Earth, Starship needs about 100 meters per second of delta-V, using around 6 tons of propellant. On Mars, it needs closer to 480 meters per second, which means about 30 tons of fuel. On Earth, terminal velocity is between 50 and 100 meters per second. On Mars, that jumps to roughly 480 meters per second. And if Starship wants to make the return trip from Mars back to Earth, it'll need a minimum of 6.4 kilometers per second in delta-V, just a bit more than Mars' escape velocity. Besides equipping Starship with landing legs, SpaceX could also explore offshore landings as a viable option. These ocean-based landings would be modeled after the Falcon 9's autonomous spaceport drone ships, or ASDS. These are specially modified barges equipped with propulsion systems that allow them to hold a precise position at sea and feature large landing platforms for rocket recovery. However, due to Starship's massive size and weight, any drone ships designed for it would need to be significantly larger and more robust. They'd have to be reinforced to manage both the intense landing forces and the thermal stress. That's because Starship's Raptor engines generate far more heat than the Falcon 9's Merlin engines. To put that into perspective, the Merlin engine produces about 86 tons of thrust, while the Raptor 2 produces 230 tons at sea level, and future versions could reach between 280 to 330 tons. This introduces a serious engineering challenge, not just for the drone ship's surface materials, but also for its onboard cooling systems. To deal with this, SpaceX already uses a water spray system on the Falcon 9 drone ships to cool the landing surface during descent. A similar, though likely more powerful system would be essential for Starship. SpaceX has already scouted multiple potential zones for Starship recovery at sea, including areas in the Atlantic Ocean for launches from Florida and spots in the Pacific for launches from Starbase in Texas. At this point, it's still unclear exactly how Starship would land on a drone ship, whether it would use landing legs or rely on a tower system like Mechazilla. Still, the idea of ocean-based operations is nothing new for SpaceX. Back in July 2020, they bought 2 deepwater oil rigs, Phobos and Deimos, from Valaris Public for $7 million. The idea was to convert them into floating launch and landing platforms for Starship. However, by February 2023, SpaceX reversed course and decided to sell the rigs before making any modifications. According to company president Gwynne Shotwell, the decision came down to timing. With Starship still in its early development phase, it made more sense to focus on building up flight experience and proving the system's reliability through repeated launches from land-based facilities. Even though they scrapped the original oil rig project, SpaceX hasn't abandoned the offshore concept entirely. In October 2023, Elon Musk reaffirmed that the company still plans to create a purpose-built ocean platform for Starship. This means sea-based solutions are very much still part of SpaceX's long-term vision for enabling rapid, high-frequency launches, even if that goal is now a little further down the road. Sea-based landing platforms come with a range of clear advantages. They eliminate concerns about Starship landings impacting populated areas or damaging critical infrastructure. They also improve fuel efficiency by removing the need for return-to-launch site maneuvers and add flexibility to landing operations, since a mobile platform can adjust its location to simplify Starship's descent path. These platforms aren't just for landings either. They could also support Starship launches. A mobile launch platform would allow for more flexible launch locations, reduce risk to populated zones, and ease congestion at land-based sites. Additionally, such a platform could serve as a transport hub, moving Starship components between major operational centers. As the Starship program scales, SpaceX may require extensive infrastructure to support launches and recoveries, and a multi-purpose sea-based platform could be a key part of that future. With proper upgrades, this system could enhance the efficiency, scalability, and flexibility of Starship operations. There's also the potential for fewer regulatory hurdles, such as FAA launch approvals, thanks to the reduced proximity to population centers. If flight rates increase and reusability becomes standard, sea-based operations may even prove more cost-effective. Plus, the ability of the platform to reposition itself could significantly simplify Starship's flight path. On the flip side, running sea-based platforms, especially ones the size of aircraft carriers, comes with major challenges. The cost of operation is high, and the logistical demands are enormous. These platforms would need to support immense weight and require extensive infrastructure to function effectively. Operating such a vessel would demand a large crew and significant resources. While they minimize impacts on human communities, They introduce potential environmental issues, like disturbing marine wildlife with the thunderous noise of rocket launches, or affecting ecosystems through gas releases into the ocean. Environmentalists could also raise concerns about whale migration paths or the presence of rare marine species, possibly stalling missions. Building and operating offshore launch pads adds another layer of complexity compared to land-based alternatives. Floating structures face engineering hurdles, and transporting staff, cargo, and equipment adds difficulty. Repairs and maintenance are more complicated in the middle of the ocean. And let's not forget the harsh marine environment. Saltwater is corrosive, ocean winds are unpredictable, and even with SpaceX's past experience operating autonomous drone ships, weather delays could still disrupt scheduled missions. SpaceX is developing a revolutionary metallic heat shield. Lightweight, insanely tough, and far more reusable than anything we've seen before. It's promised to be 300% more effective than current ceramic heat shields. If that's true, this isn't just innovation, it's a direct challenge to the entire aerospace industry. What the big aerospace players once dismissed as pure fantasy, SpaceX is turning into reality. It's Elon Musk's crazy ideas that are breaking through the noise, changing everything we thought we knew about material science and spacecraft design. Kind of like the early 1900s, when the whole world believed that humans could never fly like birds. The Wright brothers quietly built the first airplane, opening the door to a golden age of aviation that we're still living in today. All right, back to the main question. What exactly is this new metal heat shield we're talking about? SpaceX has taken a completely different approach. They didn't just tweak the old designs, they reimagined the heat shield from the ground up. Stainless steel, yeah, the same kind of metal you've got in your kitchen drawer, but they've pushed it to a whole new level. Just like the current ceramic tiles, these metal ones are also shaped into hexagons. That design helps avoid straight gaps where hot plasma could sneak through, spreads the forces more evenly, and makes assembly easier. But here's the real twist. Unlike ceramics, these metal tiles use that special system SpaceX is testing, called transpiration cooling. Sounds a little technical, right? Let me break it down for you. They've added tiny microscopic holes to the stainless steel plates, which allow liquid or fuels to seep through. When things heat up, that liquid turns into vapor, forming a protective layer. You could call it transpiration cooling. The metal basically cools itself while creating an extra thermal buffer between the spacecraft and the hellish heat of re-entry. This metal heat shield outperforms traditional ceramic tiles by up to 300% when it comes to thermal efficiency. I mean, it's tougher and handles heat way better. 3 times better, to be exact. What's even more impressive is that it doesn't weigh much more than the ceramic system, and the production cost. Just a tenth of what ceramics cost. So how's that even possible? It all comes down to physics and some material properties that aerospace engineers have been overlooking for decades. Now we all know that metal conducts heat really fast, which, by traditional spacecraft standards, sounds like a terrible idea for a heat shield. But SpaceX has cleverly turned that so-called weakness into a strength. Here's how it works. As the metal heats up during re-entry, thermal sensors kick in and trigger a system that pushes water or methane, stored behind the tiles, through those tiny microholes. The moment that liquid hits the superheated surface, it evaporates instantly. That creates continuous cooling through 2 powerful physical effects. First, the phase change from liquid to gas sucks up a ton of heat. And second, that vapor forms a protective barrier that shields the spacecraft from the intense heat outside. This mechanism is kind of like how our own bodies sweat. When your body heats up, whether from exercise, stress, or just a hot day, it releases sweat through tiny pores in your skin. Same idea here. The metal heat shield sweats through microscopic holes, cooling itself down in a super efficient way. And that's something traditional ceramic tiles simply can't do. This fundamental shift in thinking has led to a shocking 300% boost in performance, something that's turning heads across the entire aerospace industry. Yeah, the ceramic heat shield on Starship looks like it's doing the job for now, but let's be real, it still falls short of what Elon Musk is really going for. In an interview with Everyday Astronaut last year, Musk shared some insightful thoughts on the current state of heat shields. He pointed out that while ceramic heat shield tiles are useful, they still have their flaws, and the full reusability of Starship hasn't been achieved yet. The problem is a tough one to solve because no one has successfully created a heat shield that can handle the extreme re-entry temperatures and be reused right away for the next flight. Let's break down some of the serious problems these ceramic tiles are dealing with. First off, these things are insanely expensive and time-consuming to make. They're designed to handle temperatures over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The tiles are made from advanced ceramic materials, usually silica-based, or sometimes something even more complex like TUFROC, which stands for Toughened Unipiece Fibrous Reinforced Oxidation-Resistant Ceramic. That's the same kind of stuff used on military spacecraft, like the Boeing X-37. These materials have to be engineered on a microscopic level to get the right balance of toughness, crack resistance, and insulation. TUFROC, if that's what SpaceX is using, has a density of around 400 kilograms per cubic meter. That's heavier than the old silica tiles from NASA's space shuttle, which came in at about 250 kilograms per cubic meter, but it's also more durable and heat resistant. Making these ceramic tiles isn't like pressing bricks in a factory. It takes high-temperature ovens, specialized shaping techniques to create that hexagon form, and extremely precise manufacturing. Each tile has to be able to survive the hell of re-entry without cracking or falling apart. And yeah, all that complexity adds up to time and money. Second, putting on 18,000 ceramic tiles is no small feat. Each tile's about 9.5 inches wide, 1.3 inches thick, and the whole heat shield weighs somewhere between 5 to 8 tons. They attach the tiles with steel bolts or special glue, and in some spots, they need extra padding. Even though SpaceX uses robots to speed things up, it's still a slow process, especially if the tiles are damaged or missing and need to be replaced. This slows down turnaround times and raises costs, making it harder to reuse Starship quickly and efficiently. Third, even though they're made from advanced materials like silica-based ceramics or TUFROC, the tiles are still prone to cracking or falling off due to vibrations during launch or the extreme heat during re-entry, up to 2,552 degrees Fahrenheit. Tests, like the IFT-4 flight, showed that some tiles were damaged, requiring checks and replacements. SpaceX upgraded the tiles, making them twice as durable, and added an ablative layer for extra protection. But there's still a risk that even one missing tile could cause major damage to the spacecraft's body. Moreover, traditional ceramic tiles work purely through insulation. They absorb a lot of heat but transfer it very slowly. Think of them like the thermal blanket of a spacecraft. The problem is, they're passive systems with no way to release the built-up heat, other than gradually radiating it away. On the other hand, using a metal heat shield solves all these problems. Because it's made from stainless steel, it's incredibly cheap, ranging from $2,500 to $3,200 per ton, depending on the type. If you use 316 stainless steel, it'll be about 10% more expensive. Plus, it can withstand extreme temperatures without deforming. However, many space enthusiasts predicted Musk would fail spectacularly when he announced plans to use stainless steel heat shields on spacecraft, arguing that the extreme temperatures in orbit would make it melt like butter. Musk simply responded with a video showing them using a flame torch on the steel, which is said to be the material used for the metal heat shields later on. This left NASA engineers stunned. For decades, they had never considered using metal like stainless steel for heat shields. Instead, they relied on materials like carbon phenolic, a type of plastic used for heat shields on the Mercury Redstone 3, and ceramics used for the heat shields on the Space Shuttle. What's even more jaw-dropping to aerospace giants is that SpaceX pulled this off for under $50 million. Pennies compared to NASA's massive spending on developing the heat shields for the Space Shuttle, which included costly thermal tiles and advanced composite materials. Finally, they joined the race, launching a new research program focused on discovering materials for the future. Last year, NASA invested in 4 U.S. companies to research GRX-810, a material that can be 3D printed, withstand extreme temperatures, and endure the harsh conditions of air and space travel, with the potential to bring commercial profit. NASA engineers designed GRX-810 for aerospace applications, including rocket engine injectors, combustion chambers, turbines, heat shields, and heat-resistant parts capable of withstanding temperatures above 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This move indirectly aligns with SpaceX's view that metal heat shields are completely feasible. Well, the real story here isn't that the idea itself is new or groundbreaking. It's not. What's revolutionary is that SpaceX had the guts to rethink everything and actually apply these old principles at full scale in a real spacecraft. That's something the traditional aerospace world, with all its caution and red tape, never dared to take seriously. So, is this one bold innovation enough to carry SpaceX all the way to Mars? Of course it is. Why not?
It's not about just landing on Mars and doing flags and footprints. It's about creating a self-sustaining city on Mars.
Musk spoke in a recent TV interview, doubling down on his vision. He's not just thinking about a short visit. He's determined to establish a permanent human presence on the red planet. And the metal heat shield plays a huge role in this mission. SpaceX backed this up in a post last year. We recently tested heat shield materials in a simulated Martian atmosphere as we aim to launch the first starships to Mars in 2026. And from the test images, it's clear they're working with metal, most likely stainless steel. Why steel? Because it's far more durable than ceramics. It's tougher, more impact-resistant, and stands up better against micrometeoroids or floating debris in space. That durability means fewer chances of damage during the long, harsh journey to Mars. Stainless steel components can be produced using relatively simple manufacturing methods. Any damage can be easily repaired with basic welding tools. Tools that could actually be available in a Mars colony. And the best part? The evaporative cooling system can be recharged and reused between each use. But here's where it gets even more impressive. On Mars missions, the same heat shield system that's used for re-entry could be repurposed to manage heat during surface operations. So instead of just being dead weight, the heat shield becomes a versatile piece of infrastructure with multiple uses. Starship designed to carry at least 100 tons on each reflight. Even the upgraded Starship version 3, which can handle up to 200 tons thanks to its larger fuel tanks and the powerful thrust of 33 Raptor 3 engines, generating 17 million pounds of thrust. This trade-off can be accepted, especially if it means successfully transporting cargo to Mars and safely returning to Earth. In the end, SpaceX has shown us that the limits we accept are often just a product of our collective imagination. The real question isn't whether humans can get to Mars, but when. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.